Get a move on here. We're gonna call the meeting to order. Do we have any citizens' comments? Stephanie, anything on?
Nope.
Okay, good. Let's take a look at the minutes from April. Everyone had a chance to peruse those. Somewhat like.
I trust that other people do. One day I'll be.
Anyone want to move to accept them?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any corrections, additions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Hi.
All right. All right, administrative reports, my report. All right, so I've been working on the elimination of the preservation board.
Oh, no, the transformation. Okay, yeah. Sure. Find the
And,
elimination. All right.
From my perspective, it's an elimination from some of the structural things. And I actually had a 2-hour-long meeting with Bill Callahan from the SHPO's office.
Oh, you
He and
go.
I are gonna start meeting on a regular
Brilliant
basis
minds.
to help with this transition, because he's a resource we really need to use, and he is concerned. Coincidentally,
Does everyone know who Bill is? He's a huge
Bill?
resource, was on the committee before and then.
he's the Western coordinator for the State Historic Preservation Office, and so he lives in Mount Lebanon, and he's been on the preservation board. He was on the preservation board when the district was created. So he's very knowledgeable about historic preservation and Mount Lebanon, so that's very handy. Coincidentally, we were at Orvis, and the table next to us, Andrew Flynn was there talking with somebody about the transition from, I forget now, Parks maybe.
Like just over at the coffee shop? or
Yeah, we were at Bill and I were at the coffee shop. We sat down. So after we finished his conversation, he joined us for a while too. But we had a long meeting. And I mean, Bill and I were expressing some concerns about this whole transition and really, we aren't going to have an historic preservation board. I mean, we're not even in the title. Come on, let's be honest. And that's a concern. And there is a real possibility that historic preservation get lost in the shuffle, given the lack of representation on the board overall, because it's a 9-person board. At most, there will be 3 people interested in historic preservation, so there's never a majority vote there. Commissioner Flynn, I don't know if he's mentioned this with you guys, has talked about maybe creating an historic preservation subcommittee.
I haven't heard that word. I heard like an association or an authority was the thing I was kind of trying to investigate a little bit, like some kind of entity. But
But
okay,
this would be a subcommittee of that board.
okay,
So the 3 people who are interested in historic preservation would form a non-quorum subcommittee to do all the real work, and then just bring it to the board as
And
a
then
whole.
rubber stamp it.
Yeah, although if you got economic development and
Hopefully.
environmental sustainability there, you may have a whole nother discussion. But basically is that they do the real work, bring proposals to the board. I have some concerns about that structure. Because basically if you're doing that for each one of those 3 entities, you're taking 3 boards and creating 4 groups. So the volunteers are now meeting twice a month,
Yeah,
not just once a month. So it reduces the workload on staff and commission liaisons, but it's increasing the workload for folks, commitments for folks who are going to be volunteers potentially. And I'm not sure how those conversations will go, but I mean, it's an idea. We're going to need to work on this.
yeah.
One of the things I was looking at the functions and duties that are officially part of the advisory board from the ordinance. Have you ever actually read that? Any of you guys?
The new one?
There's a new ordinance
new
for the
one.
preservation board.
Oh, no, not just for the preservation, but the old one. You're talking about the original.
The original preservation board
I
ordinance.
had not read it.
Yeah, well,
but I would
it's
love to see it.
undoable, basically.
I would love to see it. Okay, Yeah.
Pass along, but basically, I mean, one of the things, like, for instance, undertake, maintain, and periodically update a comprehensive survey and inventory to identify historically, architecturally, and archaeologically significant buildings, sites, objects, structures, landscapes, and districts in the municipality. That's a big task,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, there's no way an advisory board is doing that. Particularly, they're not gonna have, I mean, how often have you had an archaeologist on, for instance, on your board?
yeah.
We haven't done any archaeological surveys yet. Maybe we could start with. Get you guys lined up, give you some pin flags, and we'll go out and start walking around town and looking for artifacts. Anyway, but it's a very long list of duties. And so.
Yeah, you guys should look at it now. Can I?
Yeah,
take-
anybody take a quick look at it. I mean, mostly I just want to point out, it's obviously got to be totally redone. With the new, even without.
That doesn't work either.
Yeah, because that's, I don't think we've been following
That
that,
doesn't work, but something, yeah,
because we've contracted for those types of jobs
right.
to do the, create the district and so forth.
Could I keep that copy or do you need it back?
Sure, I can pull it off, it's on the website.
That's okay.
I didn't pull it, so you can have that. if you want. Anyway, part of the issue, and Bill was very helpful in bringing me up to date on some of this, is the nature of our historic district. And I don't know how many of you guys realize, we have one of the largest historic districts in the state, indeed, one of the largest in the country.
No.
Yes, if you take, I went to read, we went over the nomination, we have 3,341 contributing buildings, 21 contributing sites, that includes things like Bird Park. Yes, Bird Park is a contributing member of
Wow.
the historic district. So even if there's proposed changes to that, we are should be reviewing those technically. Although I don't think they're doing anything that's alter its historical significance.
Yeah.
There are 38 distinct historic residential subdivisions. And 1,306 acres. That is a huge historic district. I mean, most historic districts would be something like our neighborhoods. Or a street front, you know, a few blocks with a certain historical integrity, or Virginia Manor, for example, as a neighborhood would be a good example of, that could be a district on its own. And I guess at one point, there was some discussion about creating its own HAB, which is a historical archaeological review board, to make it legislatively, what do they call it? A legislative historic district, so that any changes in the historic district would have to be approved.
This is something that was interesting to me, because coming from a city previously where I was employed by the Office of the Historic Preservation Officer. The historic districts that I'm used to are ones where they are enforceable. I mean, within to some degree, obviously, I understand with the National Historic Preservation Act and all those sorts of things, there's only so much you can do. But like things had to actually come to a board for approval. And so I was curious as to why Mount Lebanon, you don't have to come to a board for approval. And so it sort of seems like it's just putting a sticker on a neighborhood to say it's. that's
Well,
yours.
I mean, it's the National Register Historic District has no such regulations.
Right.
That is state by state. And there is a Pennsylvania Historic District Act, which is been around for a long time, which would allow us to do that. And there was some discussion of just within Virginia Manor, creating that as a legislative historic district.
Yeah,
People were in favor of it because someone was going to be destroying one of their houses and they wanted to keep the integrity of their neighborhood, right? When they started the process, this was when Bill Callahan was still around, on Brentwood. When they started that process and the people realized it would apply to their property,
exactly.
it got shot down in a hurry. So that's part of the problem, is people want things like that to apply to your neighbor. But nobody wants to think that they would have to get approval from the municipality to change their windows, for example. But right, the National Register does not prohibit you from doing whatever you want to do to your property. You can destroy it if you want, and within the
We've
last,
seen it.
year and a half,
Yeah.
there's another house that was totally destroyed in that
Right,
neighborhood.
Valley View.
So But we don't, we don't have that here. That's not an option. So, we went with an historic, National Register Historic District.
What
Not
do you
the
mean we
state.
don't, well, that's not an
The
option.
municipality did not choose.
Yeah, we could have,
We could have,
we could in the future, but we.
and they
currently
tried it
can't.
and it obviously wasn't gonna work.
There's not a
in the
lot of
municipality.
political will.
And it's tough when you have a district this big.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, could you imagine trying to legislate or review 3,341 different structures every time they wanted to get a new roof,
Yeah, that's
change a
true.
window, had to go to a review board to get that approved? I mean, most of those types of districts, like I say, are much smaller. So it's a different type of animal as part of the point.
Why was it made into one giant district? Why didn't they subdivide it?
Interesting point, because they started off smaller, I think primarily originally in Mission Hills area, and it just kept expanding and expanding because of the integrity and the degree of preservation. I mean, to some degree, it's very unusual, but it can be celebrated. The Mount Lebanon is so unique that it's preserved historical integrity to the point that you have all these neighborhoods that have been preserved for 100 years with, it's not historical integrity, be part of the district.
Can you say that again? We have enough neighborhoods with,
We have, 38 distinct neighborhoods that have maintained their historical integrity for over 100 years, sufficient to be listed on the National Register. It would be crazy creating 38 different historic districts. You'd have to have separate nominations for each one and go through that process, which is lengthy and expensive. That would take forever. But apparently what Bill's told me is, well, they started up and they kept expanding until they ran out of money. And that in part, that's how the boundary was established.
yeah, so it could be expanded.
So that's one of the reasons why we're thinking right now about over the next 10 years is let's take a closer look at the district, maybe expanding it and revising the boundaries and so forth. But we'd probably have to get some funding to do that because it's a fair amount of work to evaluate all those structures and do that. We had a contractor did the original nomination. If you want to look at it sometime, it's online on our Historic Preservation Board website. The actual nomination form's on there.
Mhm.
It's almost 200 pages long, but you don't have to read the whole thing. There's summaries at the beginning. For some of this. So anyway, the point is that I think we need to have an historic preservation policy. So that no matter what happens with structural changes, there's a policy behind things. Whether it's related to the Section 106 issues that we've had from time to time or anything else that comes up for the Preservation Board or the municipality. That there is a policy in place, so we know what's going to happen. And I will be working with Bill Callahan on developing some drafts along these lines
Awesome.
to bring forward as part of this transition year that we're going through here, so. Anyway, that's my long-winded administrative report.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm gonna I share your concerns. I mean, you're winning me over. I think we've had enough of these conversations that I really do see your point and agree with you that it just might not fit into the current structure, the historic preservation, and maybe we need a separate entity. I don't know what that is, and but I want to continue that
Right, I mean, I understand,
conversation.
I get Andrew's desire to create a structure
Right,
that's better.
manageable.
He's more manageable particularly for commissioners and staff,
Right.
not having 1,000 boards strung out and you guys going to meetings all over the place.
And there's been times where it's hard to meet, not because, I mean, not when, recently we didn't have enough members, but in the past it's hard to make quorum and we don't have any business. It's not really a reason to meet. And this particular board has been ebbs and flows with its work. Sometimes there's a lot of work like brick streets and people are working a lot of hours and then outside of the meetings. And then, I think maybe before I came on, there's been times where there's not much going on and why are we meeting? So that's what we're struggling with. What's that right structure? Maybe it's its own entity, but it only meets 6 times a year. I don't know. I'm literally just brainstorming.
Well, I mean, the board was created like a decade before we had a district. Now that we have a district, things have changed and we haven't revisited what the board responsibilities really should be.
Yes,
So as part of this transition, that's part of what we can work on here
thanks for taking the lead on that.
and try to figure out just have actually a policy in place about historic preservation for the municipality so that there are structural changes, you still have a policy about what's gonna happen. You know, the commission's gonna decide, well, who's gonna do this or that, but right now there's no policy, so that's part of the worry, things will fall through the cracks, right? All right, so that's my report. Scarlett's not here. Mindy Rainey, you're up next.
I'm gonna do one quick math so that I'm sure that my numbers are here for a second.
Okay.
All right. So the commission, a big report, I got a big beefy report. Had very in-depth discussion on brick streets at the last public discussion. Please take a look and tune in. We didn't make any decisions, but we were introduced to the idea from the municipal staff of what streets their municipal staff recommends preserving as brick for perpetuity and what streets would be okay to resurface as asphalt and not save as brick when they reach the end of their useful life. And however that's determined is going to be a separate conversation. We, the commission, did not come to any conclusion about whether we agree with staff's recommendations or not, but we were introduced to those streets and had some, I think, pretty hearty discussions for over an hour about how to kind of approach this and the value of different options of approaching it. Primarily, we were looking at the money as well, and also just what if, one idea which the Historic Preservation Board recommended is what if we preserve all of our streets? That's estimated to be an additional $600,000 a year. We really don't know the true number until we get into it, but that's what the engineers have estimated right now. So we would need to find $600,000 a year or agree to do less asphalt reconstruction and take some of the money out of that. And that would have an impact on the overall OCI number across the municipality. At a previous discussion that maybe you guys tuned into or heard the report of, we talked about that a little bit more in detail. And eventually over 20 years, if we didn't fund more money for Brick Street reconstruction, and we just use the existing budget that we have right now, which is 2.2 million for reconstruction of streets, 3 million total for street repair and sidewalk and stormwater, we would be at about a PCI of 60. Right now we're at a PCI of 80. So the streets would be, in a 60, you do notice the surface of those streets being a little less pleasant to drive on. And that is an option that's on the table to use the existing funds, just include all the brick streets. And in 20 years, our streets won't be as pleasant to drive on, but we'll have preserved all of our brick streets. The other option on the table that probably has a little more support is to find some additional resources, whether that's taxes or other options to preserve the brick streets. The majority of, the staff and commission have already decided that we're creating a brick streets preservation policy, and we are preserving brick streets, and we're going to find a way to get the money. Now we're just in the weeds of what brick streets are definitely going to be preserved and what are we okay with not funding. And so the two options that we saw from staff, and that's public, and I can also get you a spreadsheet of what those streets are. And I won't run through them now because just saying the streets names doesn't tell you exactly where it starts and ends, but it's just be a little bit easier if you could take a look, because we didn't make any decisions and I would appreciate hearing from you all on what your thoughts are. If there's any, especially, well, I guess anything, any of your thoughts, whether, there's something you don't really think are worth preserving, which I don't think that's the case. And then definitely some that would be like, wow, this would really be a tragedy to lose this section of this brick street. So the numbers work out to be, one of the options was to preserve approximately 92% of our streets. And the other one was closer to 85% of our streets that we saw from staff. And we did get into the weeds about like which streets and why, and each commissioner is going back right now in the next few weeks until we have it back on public discussion. It's not, I don't know the schedule yet, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll have it back on. In the meantime, we're going back through our own wards because each commissioner is responsible for a ward and looking at those streets like firsthand. And we already looked at Google Maps and I already kind of know the ones on my street pretty well, but just people wanted to have like another look with fresh eyes, what it would really be the impact. The ones that were on the list for being cut, which will be obviously the most contentious and the bigger conversation to have, A lot of them were more dead-end streets, some of them were alleys. So that's the struggle that we're making. And then some of them had some steep slopes, like Crystal. But we've living with that steep slope for a long time. There really hasn't been a lot of accident data. It's been difficult for garbage trucks and plows, difficult, but those are the kind of things we're waiting. So if you have the ability, please take a look at the list that I'll send over and let me know what you think.
At what point will the public be involved? Like the ones whose streets are gonna go away? Because that's where the issue comes, is when you decide, make a decision to destroy someone's brick street. They can get quite angry if they don't know about it ahead of time.
100%. So two pieces of that. So after we've decided what those streets are that aren't guaranteed to be preserved, that'll be public information. So people can start to contact us immediately. And then we're requesting that there be 180-day notification requirement if a brick street is going to be recommended to be reconstructed. So, 180 days, which is, you know, like essentially going to be a year because of the cycle, the construction cycle.
I mean, I overall, I
And we're gonna
applaud this
put that in the
because the most
policy.
important thing is we're getting this in the system. And
Yes.
it's gonna, it will lead hopefully to improve efficiencies with contracting, finding people to do the work. When it becomes a regular part of our budget, a regular part of our operating procedures here,
Right.
that's ultimately going to be helpful. And hopefully maybe even be able to preserve more big streets if we can bring the costs down by doing various efficiencies and figure out better way. Once we're committed to doing it,
Right.
we're gonna find better ways of doing it.
I fully believe that's the case. Fully believe
Because
that.
we're gonna want to save money.
I think think we're just gonna, it's gonna be, the cost is gonna be driven down, so it won't quite be 600 or 550 or whatever. Over time. And we don't, we don't know the life cycle of a brick street. We're making some guesses or making some estimates on that, and maybe.
There's always been a lot of debate about that.
That's contention.
And we got some discussion about that at the coffee shop, actually.
Right,
In the bill.
that's fair, yeah. We were wondering, like, the commission was wondering, do we even need to write the list of streets down in the policy itself? And after kind of some more discussion, yes, if the streets and the exact segments aren't listed in the policy to be preserved, there's really nothing to stop a future commission or future municipal staff from coming in and doing what's cheaper and easier, which is replacing brick with asphalt. So I think it's imperative that we put those streets in there. And that means that some streets aren't going to make the cut. Or maybe not, or maybe we just say we're keeping all brick no matter what. We've dealt with it this far. We dealt with it for 100 years. We can keep dealing with those alleys. It's really like, how do you want to use taxpayer funds? That's where it's coming down to. We're gonna say 80%, 85%, 90%, or 95% of the brick. And at least we're in that 80+% conversation. Nothing's more than less than 85% really. So I'm happy about that. I feel personally like we've already had a big win, and large thanks to everyone in this room, or the old timers and the older people who've been on the board for a while that worked so hard for 3 years on the brick streets preservation policy. Kept bringing it back. So we're in the win. And now we're like in these kind of uncomfortable weeds. And then, we have to have those conversations with those residents that didn't make the cut if there are streets.
I don't know if this is a dumb question, but how do you notify people? Like, when you say 6 months in advance, do you put like a note on their door, or is this just like?
It has, so it's 6 months in advance, it has to be a letter.
letter
And
to
then
them.
right before, there's usually a note on the door as well, as a reminder, like, this is the exact. We don't have people's emails, that's like, that constantly comes up. We wish we could collect that information, because then we could do an email and a letter, but.
I just didn't know if it was something you posted like online, this is happening, and then before you know it, the truck's on their street and they're on social media complaining that no one told them. That's why I was asking, because that's what happens.
Yes, the new letter that just started 2 years ago, maybe the notifications that we do, the letter that you receive in the mail for this is for all reconstruction, not just brick, references the website, and the website has the exact schedule because the schedule changes day to day, especially based on weather. So you can go
Paper
there.
public notice is the best way to go, because there's so much other stuff that clutters people's inboxes nowadays.
Right?
I feel like they would lose it. You're gonna recognize a letter when you get one.
Then you get a letter from the municipality, like, what do I owe money? Do I owe money now?
Well,
That's right.
Yeah.
When this first came up, there was the notification was by the contractor.
3 days.
So it literally
2 days
was
before.
and they were just basically when the truck showed
Yeah,
up. They were
when it's
basically,
scraping
hey,
the
I'm
school.
taking your Brook Street away, which is why the residents of Duquesne Street came, about 20 of them came barging in here one day. And to one of our meetings, bad, that's happened. And that's what's prompted this whole movement to create this policy. We don't want that type of thing. And that one thing that the municipality changed pretty quickly when we pointed this out, they said, hey, you can't wait to notify people you're doing something like this to their street
Yeah,
till have the contractor do it. You've got to have a notification system, and they did do that
do that immediately.
pretty quickly and getting that done.
Now there's the letter that references the website. And that's no matter what is being on your street, except, no surprise, if it's the utility companies. So if it's water, gas, and they're ripping up your street. We ask them to notify you, but they're not gonna send a letter. You
But
might
they're
have-
required to replace it though, the way it was.
Oh,
That's
so-
different. That,
Yes.
it's not going away forever.
Yes,
Part of the problem with Duquesne is you were taking away a resource that's been had forever.
yes, that pertains to brick, yeah. Or whatever street you live on, if the utility company comes, they just show up, often because it's an emergency, they don't really want to show up either, so, there we are, emergency situations, but yeah, you're right. All utility companies are required to replace brick and brick, and we are out there, like, the director of public works is out there personally, making sure they're doing a good job laying the brick. Otherwise. So let me send you all the list of streets, and then I would say I have at least a good 2 weeks. It's not on the next commission discussion. The next one is already set with sidewalks. Care about sidewalks. We're trying to make it easier for residents to get sidewalks and just easier for the municipality to put sidewalks in across the board. Because that's, if not the number one, very close to the number one thing that we keep hearing from the comprehensive plan surveys and just in life. It's not actually as safe and walkable of a district as we were.
That was a big conversation in my task group. So,
Let's do it. I want to do that immediately.
well, there were some folks who lived on Kelso, for instance, one person.
Kelso's a bad one. Kelso's like
Think about, can
one of
you
my
imagine
top 5 streets.
living on Kelso
Kelso.
and
Mhm.
wanting to take your dog for a walk?
Yeah, and then by Foster, there's not a great sidewalk.
We lived on
Woodland.
Lindendale, which was one of the
Lindendale.
reasons why we moved. Straight.
I hate that one. That one, and Greenhurst doesn't have consistent sidewalks, and there's so much high school traffic there. Rec
Yeah.
center traffic, pool traffic. Those are my top 3. What do you have for sidewalks? What's the worst streets? Kelso, Greenhurst, Lindendale, and then by Foster, there's like Woodland is the main one.
I would say Woodland isn't terrific. That's around the corner from me.
You live by there? Yeah, Woodland's awful, right? Because there's kids who are trying to walk to school. That's what I hear from residents. I don't live over there. Parents are just terrified, kids are terrified. Mess.
It's not great.
Yeah, it's just really bad in the winter when there's nowhere to get off the road, and those kids are little kids that walk. Because I live on Sunridge.
Oh, you do. Kelso. Woodland, Lindendale, Greenhurst, Kelso. What else?
There aren't sidewalks on my street, but I think people kind of like it
I have a bunch of
because
sidewalks.
there's no traffic.
That's sidewalks. What neighborhood are you?
I live on Cedar. Yeah, so, but I walk like multiple miles every day, and I'm trying to learn all the neighborhoods and everything. I'm on the lookout for those things, because they're very annoying, when I go walking like in rush hour usually. So it's obviously very difficult when there's nothing there for me.
You don't care, except your
Having a
neighbor.
residential street like mine, there's not that much traffic and there's plenty of kids playing in the street all the time.
So you're good.
We don't,
Yeah,
it's not an issue, but like the streets you're talking about, clearly,
a lot of
that's a
traffic.
priority, right?
And, yeah. A lot of people trying to walk. Oh, any questions?
Hey, that it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Stephanie, you got anything from Laura?
You left me nothing, so we're good.
All right. Moving on, historic signage, I don't think there's much there. There is a nice picture of our sign in the Montlevo magazine. Just you guys looked at it, check out the mag. Brick streets, I think we've covered them.
I did that out of order, but it was on the commission public discussion, so that's why I pushed it there.
Alan's out of town and he didn't have anything for public education. We need to discuss the advisory board transition. I talked a little bit about that, Mindy, so.
I don't have any new information. It's a little, there's nothing going on like the commission side. Now it's on the boards for, I can help and meet offline even and work on whatever we want to work on to make sure it gets it's preserved in some form. But I don't have.
Okay, liaison reports, comprehensive plan.
Good one.
Yes, I hope you guys had a chance to respond to the latest round of surveys, particularly the resiliency one. At our most recent task group meeting, I gave them an earful about my concern about the lack of historic preservation, cultural or even neighborhood resiliency, sustainability, or whatever in the recent survey. Not a bit, not a word. And in fact, they're noted that their definition at the start of the survey only defines environmental, natural sustainability and economic sustainability, making reference only to environment, economic, and other aspects, which clearly let me show where we would be in this new board. And also clearly that's, not helpful for them to totally basically blow us off. So they did get an earful about that. For me, I don't know if any of you guys noticed that when you did this survey.
I did not do the survey.
You didn't do the survey.
No, it's on my to-do list. It just doesn't hit it every day.
I gave Bill Callahan a hard time too, because he didn't do the survey. But I reminded them that the most popular sentiment in the original survey was, I quote, future development or redevelopment should respect Mount Lebanon's historic character. We've got to keep that in front of you guys, these folks, with designing this comprehensive survey, that's got to be part of it. So we'll see what happens, but I've got my eye on them. Make sure that we're
I
not
appreciate it.
lost in the shuffle there. Because at these two task force meetings I've been at, it's true, it's hard to get a word in edgewise with historic preservation because you're the only one there. You're full, it's there like the slide, a lot of parks people, a lot of discussion of sidewalks,
Yeah,
tree cover. They've got very specific things they want to see happen in terms of their areas of interest. Historic preservation is like this overlay over everything, right? So it's kind of hard to get a point and say, well, no, we want to do X, Y, and Z. I did mention that we were looking at re-examining the district, right? But even that is kind of vague for them to grasp it into the comprehensive plan, but maybe I will bring up the need that we are working on a new preservation policy.
yeah.
Or our first preservation policy. We don't really have a preservation policy for the municipality.
When's the next meeting of that? Is it open to the public?
These task force, no, on the public participation's online.
Okay.
And we'll still take comments online, right?
Yeah,
I think they closed that particular survey.
I think, I would, you
Those
can
were-
look it up right now.
Yeah, those were in April, I believe, the surveys you're talking about, at the end of April.
That was
Okay.
the second round of surveys, right? But there's a presence, you go on the website, there's a presence there and you can send them an email and make comments.
I did get comments in a different way, but we had a whole presentation on it.
So I have been commenting and I'm keeping an eye on, we will have one more meeting, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, the surveys are down, but you can email it.
Right. So please do. All right, Economic Development Council, Matt, you got anything to report?
Yeah, I'll take through it quickly. All right, so we met on the 28th, April 28th. There's a couple of points I wanted to mention. Number one being the board and authority transition plan. So in that group, Eric Milliron and Commissioner Flynn acknowledged the challenges of melding historic preservation with and into EDC considerations. Commissioner Flynn acknowledged himself to be more or less the champion of the consolidation process. And he, I guess, views that as feasible with active committees. Let me just offer my sense of, given all of the different thrusts of that impending committee, I frankly do think we're probably better off with the seat at that table than off on our own with the members of those committees driving the issues that drive them. Frankly, to me, it's best to have someone, one or two people to speak to historic considerations in that room. I think that this would probably be lent a little bit of strength once we've got a Brick Streets policy, and I think that the policy, Phil, that you're talking about would help that too. So I guess I'm mentioning that here, and that it seems to me like the more I think about it, and the more I think about the efforts of that impending committee, I think it's probably worthwhile for us to be at that table rather than in a different room.
Oh, okay. So you'd rather the merger go through as planned and maybe, I don't know, we have a subcommittee.
Well, I can see what Matt's saying is that where else would you put us?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the groups you have, that's clearly the best fit. He's right. Conversations with economic development can be fruitful.
And I think, and I know this is a little bit out of place in terms of my report here, but I think that these historic considerations, I wouldn't say that they battle with, but there's sometimes friction considering other priorities too. I view that as a healthy discussion. I mean, I don't feel like you can always go with historic considerations when there's other, equally important or more important considerations. I think, one takes all of this sort of in the mix and does the best you can from a policy perspective, given these conflicting priorities. And so I think that that's the right room, to my view, for us to be in. But I do wonder whether it's possible to rename the committee in some respects so that, that mentions historic considerations, so that that is a little bit higher profile, so that historic consideration issues come to our attention rather than to the attention of the historic society, who probably doesn't advocate on those as thoroughly. That would be my sense. But in any case, that was I guess I was interested by the fact that they were explaining that all. I don't know if they were explaining that because of my presence or what. It was just kind of interesting. Second thing I'll mention is there's this South Hills Mobility Task Force. So the key EDC member in that is Seth Davis. I think it probably makes sense once the Brick Streets policy is adopted for the Brick Streets committee. I think that the policy more or less calls for a committee should probably interface actively with Seth on those issues, because Seth's focus is looking beyond automobiles in terms of street usage and facilitating alternative street usage. And to the extent that that results in renovation of streets, I think that we'll want to be part of that conversation. And I think that the people who can be part of that conversation, it makes the best sense for those to be the same people who are on that Brick Streets committee that's also interfacing with other communities. So anyway, bottom line is, my message is, as soon as that policy is established, we should probably look to staff that committee and have an outreach to Seth Davis on the EDC committee. Lastly, economic vitality. So they committed their post-COVID audits of Uptown and Beverly Road business districts. Beverly Road apparently has zero vacancy at street level right now, which is interesting. And Uptown has some measure of vacancy, but it's very active with leasing of vacant space. So overall, their sense is Mount Lebanon is pretty well positioned going forward from a vibrancy perspective, but the committee is looking for opportunities to improve. I guess my takeaway from that was I think that they're looking for ways to cast available space in a better direction. But it doesn't seem like frankly, there is a whole lot of space available in any case. There's a few distinct properties. You know, for example, the former PNC property. Zoning. No, I'll skip that. Lastly, commercial districts update. The corner pub is being renovated for reopening to much excitement. And the former PNC space continues to be looked at by potential occupants. And then Needle and Bean, the records and coffee shop, continues to renovate. All right, there's my report.
So, nobody's bought PNC yet, right? Or leased it?
At that point, I'm gathering there hadn't been an active lease settled for the PNC spaces yet.
There's a new restaurant, or just maybe it just changed names, like Mediterranean with a
Oh,
kebab place.
Caspian.
Yeah, what is it called?
Well, it was, wasn't it the Turkish kebab house now? It's
Yeah.
Caspian? I'm not sure if it changed hands or what, because I know the Turkish kebab people were also people who owned a location in Squirrel Hill. It was the same people, but I don't know if they like rebranded or if it's somebody else.
All right, so anyway, soon you'll be able to get records, coffee. You can get beer at East End now. That's good news. And then Corner Pub will be renovated.
So where's our bagels?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any progress in the bagel front.
They're still trying. The bagel place is still trying to come in and find a space that works for their kitchen needs.
Yeah, frankly, Phil, I lost track of that in the balance of like, was there still gonna be a billiards table at Corner Pub? Totally lost track of
So,
it.
yeah. Okay, thanks, man. Historical Society, you guys, they haven't actually met yet.
Yeah, we have a meeting on Wednesday. I did see that I wasn't able to attend because I was out of state, but the Earth Day. They did have an Earth Day 10, the Historical Society did at the Lebo Green Earth Day event. And I know that Alan's gonna be working on public education, but you know that something like that is like, I think, a great opportunity to sort of combine, you know, join forces with them for public education, since they have a pretty strong presence of all of these public events in the future. But yeah, meeting on Wednesday, so more to report next time.
That reminds me, I actually have the name of someone in the Historical Society who's contacted Anne when she was still on our board about maybe working with us on an educational event. So I will
Yeah.
forward that information to you and
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
All right, planning board, did Marilyn send anything to you, Steph? Partnership Design Committee, Doug's not here either. Okay. Looks like maybe we'll get out of here, time for your softball. Anything else for the good of the order?
I want to reiterate, if you need some help, Phil, you reach out to everybody on this board, me, I think you're taking on the brunt of the work for the restructure and the new policy idea, and I want you to be supported.
Okay, well, I'm gonna lean on Bill quite a bit too. So
I love that. Okay, you got it, you got it.
volunteer to meet with me on a fairly
Regular
regular
basis.
basis, even
Thanks,
he likes
awesome.
having coffee, so that.
Ah, good. Okay,
Might
good.
have a long-standing reservation at Orbis or something. So we'll get it done. Okay, anything? All right, then, accept a move to adjourn.
So moved.
Our next meeting will be Monday, June 19th. 5 PM.
June 19th, 5 PM, I should be here.
Hope to see you then. All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks.